the day that we were all invited to go and see the Rose for the first time. We lived in Hampstead, and Michael and I picked up Dame Peggy at something like 5:30 in the morning to take her down to Bankside. And there were several of us there, Peter Hall and many other friends, and standing on that actual stage and realising that the tiring house, which we'd all imagined and with the drawings, was round the other way, in a different position than what we had imagined. It was fantastically exciting. We must keep it. We must preserve it. We must do all that we can to do so. Do help me in doing so. Thank you.
Here by my desk in 1989 when the phone rang, and it was my friend, the actor Roger Reeves, who said, "They found the Rose." What? And I scampered down to the South Bank and with him walked over the remains that had been uncovered there of the perhaps most historic site theatrically in the country. The remains of old clay pipes, and one felt very close to the history. And then started the battle to save the remains, which was successfully achieved thanks to one day the late Peggy Ashcroft with Judi Dench sitting in deck chairs on the site, refusing to allow the bulldozers to come in. And the end of that remarkable day, with messages going to and fro from the site to Parliament, the Thatcher government decided that the remains should be uncovered, and they were. And then they were covered up again. Was that a defeat or a victory? I don't know. Perhaps we need to recapture the excitement, which went all over the world, you know, with theatre people and audiences, of course, and anyone with an interest in our culture, so that the remains can not only be preserved, but perhaps be restored in some way, and certainly be on public display. So I was there at the beginning, and I'm still there, lending my support to the Rose. And as Laurence Olivier said at the end of that wonderful party we had, and many actors performing in the open air, he'd sent a message from Shakespeare from what turned out to be his deathbed, ending with "Cry God for Harry, England, and the Rose."
My name is Lily Nichol, and I will be reading Joan Alleyn.
Hello, my name is Jeff Rawle, and I will be reading Philip Henslowe, who was the manager of the Rose Theatre.
Hello, my name is Shane David Joseph, and I will be reading for Christopher Kit Marlowe and the English Heritage Rep.
Hello, I'm Jonathan Livingstone, and I will be playing Edward Ned Alleyn.
Hello, and I'm Michael Pennington, and I play two parts this evening, one of which is a terribly bigoted Puritan from 1598, and the other is what's wisely described as a very famous contemporary actor.
Hello, I'm Janet Suzman, and I was there too, rolling in the mud with the best of them, and I'm thrilled still to be here, and that there's yet another future for this amazing mess of a place, which means so much in our culture. And so good luck to us, to them, and to the theatre.
Hello, I'm Jane Sidell, and I'm reading the part of the archaeologist tonight. I am an archaeologist, and I've been undertaking scientific monitoring at the Rose Theatre to make sure all is well for the last 20 years.
Hello, I'm Christina Skaife, and I'm reading the part of the Demonstrator. I was there in 1989, and I'm currently a volunteer for the Rose, so I haven't left it. So let's get this show on the road, please, with your help. Thank you.
I'm Simon Hughes, and I'm reading the part of Simon Hughes, campaigner and demonstrator, and in 1989 Member of Parliament for Southwark and Bermondsey. And I'm dedicating my contribution today to that great crowd of demonstrators and protesters and campaigners for the Rose, and in particular, if I may, to my late great campaigning mother, Paddy Hughes, whose birthday it would have been today.
Good evening, I'm Fiona Munro. I've been the assistant director, co-producer on the project. So now that you've met everyone, without further ado, please enjoy our rehearsed reading of Rally for the Rose, written and directed by Ben Prusiner. Enter Joan Alleyn, dressed in Tudor clothing. She is standing on the site of the Rose Playhouse.
This is the place. No, actually, it was over there, but you know what I mean. This is where he played Faustus and Tamburlaine and Edward II and Warwick in that Henry play by the Stratford man with the funny name. But we'll talk about him later. I want to tell you about Edward Alleyn, my husband, one of the greatest actors in the world. And the Rose Playhouse was his home, or at least it felt like it. He was always here, playing to the crowds, to people like yourselves. Well, they were a bit smellier back then. And a little less drunk on Sundays. I don't think London's changed much, really. It's as busy as ever. The plague still shuts us down from time to time, but it doesn't last forever. And there's still plenty of rats. It is their city after all. We just pay the rent. Seems like we're always fighting over a bit of land or another, scratching a living off of it. My stepfather, Philip Henslowe, rented this land for 21 years before they hiked up the ground rent. You'll never guess how much they raised it to. £20 a year. Unbelievable. It used to be 7. We're not nobility, you know. Besides, Bankside isn't exactly posh. It's outside the city limits, technically speaking, so everything is legal here. Bear baiting, cockfights, brothels, and yes, even theatre. Not the most respectable profession, but an important one. Who else is going to tell the stories of who we are? Well, at £20 a year, we had to give it all up then, didn't we? We tore the playhouse down and let the remains get covered over for housing, businesses and the like. No one ever thought we'd care about this spot again. That's at least what we thought. Oh, me. I'm Mrs. Alleyn, of course, but you can call me Joan.
Enter Philip Henslowe and Christopher Marlowe. Marlowe is slumped over his writing desk.
Damn it, Marlowe. I need that new scene today.
That's my stepdad, Philip Henslowe. He runs the playhouse.
Kit, are you listening to me? Kit!
And that's Christopher Kit Marlowe, the greatest writer of his generation.
I'm asleep.
Well, could have been.
You're not asleep. You're talking to me.
Can't I talk in my sleep?
Kit, the actors are coming in half an hour. We've only got 2 days left to rehearse Edward II, and the actors need you to give them the script before they can learn the lines. They're struggling enough as it is. Yesterday's performance of The Witch of Islington was a mess.
Great title. Awful play. Though I always preferred Black Batman of the North. Who wrote that one?
I can't remember. Might have been Chettle.
I think it was Decker. Or what's the other fellow called? Shakespeare.
No, it wasn't him. Stop stalling. We need to rehearse the new scene today. The actors are in a panic.
Well, they should learn the lines they've already got. Though I always told you that 40 different plays a month were a bit much, Phil.
Don't lecture me about business. I've got to keep the money coming in. Rents are going up.
There's easier ways of making money than putting on plays.
Well, the next time you come back from forging money abroad or whatever it is you do over there, perhaps you could bring back a play or two with you.
Do you want a superior play or an inferior forgery?
Kit, do you have it or not?
Not. Tomorrow, I promise.
I'll have to hold you to that.
My stepdad always had a soft spot for Kitty Marlowe. Bit of a bad boy. Had a hand in all sorts of things we were better off not knowing about. Spying, atheism, to say nothing of his personal love affairs. He got in a lot of trouble for publicly saying, "He who loves not tobacco and boys is a fool." Though I think he had a point.
Enter Edward Alleyn reading from an actor's cue script.
What? Gaveston, welcome. Kiss not my hand. Embrace me, Gaveston, as I do thee. Why shouldst thou kneel? Knowest thou not who I am? Thy friend, thyself another Gaveston. Not Hylas was more mourned for of Hercules than thou hast been of me since thy exile. I have my wish, and in that I joy thy sight. And sooner shall the sea overwhelm my land and bear the ship that shall transport thee hence. I here create thee Lord High Chamberlain, Chief Secretary to the State and me, Earl of Cornwall, King and Lord of Man. Thy worth, sweet friend, is far above my gifts. Therefore, to equal it, receive my heart. Kid, are you sure about this? Two men in love, it's a bit indecent, don't you think?
It's the theatre. Besides, how about some realism for a change?
Yeah, fair enough.
And that handsome man is my husband, Edward Alleyn. Everyone calls him Ned. He's rehearsing Marlowe's Edward II, playing the title role, of course. Oh, I can't help myself. Hello, Ned.
Joan! My sweet mouse, come here and give us a kiss.
Mouse? Just because you're 8 feet tall doesn't make me a mouse. 5 foot is average height, you know.
Never said I was 8 feet tall. More like 6'3".
I always thought 6'8".
Whatever. How's my little mouse? Did you tend the spinach patch?
Always banging on about the spinach patch. Now, I'm stuck in the city all year round while you go gallivanting around the country on tour. Everyone was stuck indoors because of the plague, and all you wrote me about was the spinach patch.
Well, how was it?
Delicious, thank you. Give us a kiss.
Well, all right.
This was our little theatrical family at the Rose. Me, my husband Ned the star, my stepfather Philip, the business brains, and a whole host of writers from all sorts of backgrounds. You've already met Kit Marlowe, the son of a Canterbury cobbler who went to the university on scholarship. And there was Ben Jonson, the self-educated stepson of a bricklayer, plus so many more. Dekker, Middleton, Chapman, Webster, nearly every Renaissance playwright you've ever heard of or haven't heard of got his start with my stepdad. He gave everyone their first big break, chance to get their foot into the door in London's theatrical scene, so to speak. And I always did have a soft spot for that country boy from Stratford. You know the fella I mean, Will Shakespeare. Back when he was just the son of a wool smuggling glover from a town no one knew. He got his start here too, you know. My stepdad kept a record of it, wrote everything down in his diary. Here, let's see. Received at Titus Andronicus, spelled with an ampersands, and Ronicus. My stepdad was what you call a creative speller. The 23rd of January, 1594, £3 8s. Not a bad haul, eh? And here in the margin, he wrote new. Premiere was right here.
Hear me, grave fathers. Noble tribunes, stay. Be pitiful to my condemned sons, whose souls are not corrupted as 'tis thought. Let my tears staunch the earth's dry appetite. My son's sweet blood will make it shame and blush. Oh, Earth, I will befriend thee more with rain that shall distill from these two ancient urns than youthful April shall with all his showers. In summer's drought, I'll drop upon thee still. In winter, with warm tears, I'll melt the snow and keep eternal springtime on my face, so thou refuse to drink my dear son's blood. Oh, reverend tribunes. Oh, gentle, aged men. Unbind my sons, reverse the doom of death, and let me say that never wept before. My tears are now prevailing orators.
O noble father, you lament in vain. The tribunes hear you not, no man is by, and you recount your sorrows to a stone. It's not bad really, is it, this Titus Andronicus?
Well, I mean, it's not exactly Marlowe.
Give him time, Ned.
Luckily for Shakespeare, Marlowe hadn't written any more plays for the Rose, or anyone else, for almost a year, and he wasn't about to.
30th of May, 1593. I was invited by two of my fellow spies, or intelligencers as we like to be called, to attend a private feast over in Deptford. I never pass up a feast, do you? Well, the Puritans were delighted at what happened next.
Enter Thomas Beard, dressed in black and white Puritan robes and reading from a book.
Marlowe, a playmaker and a poet of scurrility. By giving too large a swing to his own wit and suffering his lust to have the full reins, fell to that great outrage and extremity that he denied God and his Son Christ, affirming our Saviour to be but a deceiver, and Moses to be but a seducer of the people, and the Holy Bible to be but vain and idle stories, and all religion but a device of policy.
Yeah. There was this one time that...
But see, what a hook the Lord put in the nostrils of this barking dog.
No need for names.
So it fell out that as he purposed to stab one with his dagger, the other party perceiving so avoided the stroke that withal catching hold of his wrist, he stabbed his own dagger into his own head. The manner of his death being so terrible, for he even cursed and blasphemed to his last gasp, and together with his breath an oath flew out of his mouth, that herein did the justice of God most notably appear, in that he compelled his own hand, which had written those blasphemies, to be the instrument to punish him, and that in his brain, which had devised the same.
Well, you'd have sworn too if someone stabbed you in the eye.
Don't pay him any mind. What a cruel thing to write.
This book instructs and warns good people of the dangers of this pestilent pit called the Bankside, this sewer of ill repute south of the river, this bog of venereal disease and confluence of such lewd persons as actors and playwrights, little better than the punks and pandas of the stews. This book
has a great title, mate. I'll give you that. Oh, yeah. The Theatre of God's Judgments. Wish I'd thought of that one. Did you consider writing for the stage?
Ah!
Well, I guess I should go too. I am dead after all. And you were just about to tell them about Shakespeare, weren't you?
Kit, you know he hated being called that.
Yeah, couldn't resist. Well, I'll see you later, Joan.
Poor Kit. He always seemed like he was born in the wrong time. He publicly stood for loving who you pleased and believing or disbelieving what you liked, but London wasn't ready for him yet. Maybe it will be someday, but I'd be surprised. They tried to tell us it was a brawl over the bill, but we didn't believe a word of it, especially after Queen Elizabeth pardoned the killer so quickly. Seems like the authorities were tired of him talking about atheism and decided to...
A trumpet fanfare sounds.
Did anyone else hear that?
Queen Elizabeth I enters with crown, jewels, and full regalia.
We thought you said this was a play about the rose.
Your Majesty.
We would never have ordered a playwright murdered. What a preposterous idea. We love the theatre. Your husband, Ned, is such a dream, isn't he? He's acting, I mean.
I never argue with royalty.
You know, he came out of retirement just for us. We so longed to see him again on the stage.
Not that I was jealous.
We must admit that we were none too pleased when Christopher Marlowe was converting my dear Sir Walter Rawle to atheism. But that doesn't mean that we don't need to justify ourselves to you. You were supposed to be talking about the rose.
Yes, Your Majesty. I was just about to talk about Shakespeare.
Who?
Shakespeare. William. Will? Bald fellow with a moustache and a little chin beard. Country boy from Warwickshire. Didn't you see Love Labour's Lost?
Wasn't that the one where if women came within a mile of court, their tongues would be cut out?
It's not my favourite.
Well, it's a bit hard not to take that personally. We remember him now. His Midsummer Night's Dream had some passages of exceeding beauty. Proceed with your tale. But we're warning you, don't stray from your topic again.
Of course, Your Majesty.
Queen Elizabeth exits.
Oh, I should have mentioned Midsummer instead. Rumour has it she asked to see it one last time before she died. Well, that certainly gave me a fright. Nothing like a little government censorship, eh? We always had that to contend with. Playwrights like Ben Jonson were constantly bouncing in and out of prison. One time, my stepdad had commissioned a play, but when he took it to the Master of Rebels...
We are listening.
Yes, of course. What was I saying? Yes, things kicked off for Master Shakespeare from there, didn't they? He switched companies and eventually built a competing playhouse, the Globe, just on that corner opposite. The cheek. My stepdad was furious when that was going up. Did everything he could to steal their customers coming out of the Globe, almost as much as they tried to steal ours at the Rose. But we had started a little theatre district and it wasn't stopping now. Eventually, my stepdad said he would rather pull down the playhouse than pay the inflated rents. So we did, and built a new playhouse across the water, the Fortune. And we lost track of the Rose property after we left it. Everyone did, up until your day, wasn't it? Well, up until January of 1989, close enough to my time from where I'm sitting. A whole group of people, grown men and women, started digging in the Thames mud, as though the stones could speak themselves. What could they be looking for? Buried treasure?
Enter an archaeologist, dressed for a dig circa 1989.
There was an old office block in Southwark that they wanted to tear down to build a new one. Shinier, but just the same, really. Now, every time you build something in London, you have to do an exploratory dig just to see what's there, what the history is. You make records of what you find, you box the artifacts up, stuff them in a museum somewhere, and then the bulldozers come in, churn it all up and slather on the concrete. It's a way of preserving the past on paper. So that's what we were doing, just due diligence for a month or two at the most. The first thing we found was a Victorian warehouse. Well, the floor of, just a timber warehouse floor, but it was really, really exciting. And we could actually link that to a Victorian survey map and say that was that building. Then you dig a little deeper, go down to the next layer, and there were houses along the street front, little tenements from the 17th, 18th century. And at the northern end, there was an enormous area with lots of little holes, which were cloth dyeing vats. So we thought we found everything that was left. Nothing exciting to anyone but us, but even if they are just an 18th century house or a 17th century dye house, whatever, they have to be measured, described, the whole works. That's just basic archaeology. Maps any older than that aren't reliable. You don't really know what's where. But then we dug down a little bit further and we saw two walls at a funny angle. And we thought, wow, these walls look polygonal. And that sort of kicked it all off. And we knew it was there, that we were there.
My stepdad first built the Rose in 1587, of course. It was round, all sort of round with a bunch of little straight walls at funny angles, not a right angle, more diagonal, polygonal, as they would say. It was real small, or as the actors like to say, intimate. And in 1592, when my husband Ned agreed to lend his star power to the Rose, my stepdad expanded it as far as he could to fit in a bigger stage and more audience into the pit. So it got a bit stretched, more like an egg in a circle. What a mess it was for the standing audience when it rained. All the groundlings smushed up in the mud. What was it you called it?
Judah, moshing.
Mushing.
Moshing.
Playwrights, always coming up with the weirdest phrases.
I'm an archaeologist.
Well, that's no excuse, is it? Well, as I was saying, it was still cramped even with the expansion. My stepdad kept records of it, of course.
A note of such changes as I have laid out about my playhouse in the year of our Lord 1592 as followeth. Item paid for a barge, £3, 10 shillings. Item paid for timber and bringing by water, £7 and 9 shillings. Item paid for lime, 9 shillings 2 pence. Item paid for wages, 19 shillings. Item paid unto the Thatcher, 7 shillings. Item paid for bringing of stuff, 6 pence.
Stuff? What stuff?
If he remembered things like that, he wouldn't have had to write it down at all, would he?
You've still got this book today, of course. My Ned kept it along with other bits and pieces, playhouse building contracts, an acting cue script, backstage lists, all one of a kind now. But no one knew why my stepdad had to pay for all these repairs to the building. Not until they started digging. Found the 2 sets of back walls, the older and the newer stage, discovered the expansion, you see. Without my stepdad, Henslowe's record book, and the actual Rose site, you lot wouldn't know a thing about theatres from our time.
From there, the discoveries kept coming. We found a cannonball. What was a cannonball doing on the site? We found a skull as well, a human skull. And then we realised the cannonball is what they use for the sound effects of thunder. The skull was probably a prop.
We'll check the record book.
We found lots more, including a fork.
Uh-huh.
Well, it was always thought that you didn't have forks in use in this country, really until the late 17th century. But this was found at about the layer of 1590, 1600. So it brings forward by almost 100 years the use of the fork here.
Well, I could have, of course we had forks. I could have told you that.
There was a lot of work to be done. But the builders wanted the site back so they could start laying foundations for the office block. They were losing money every day that we delayed construction. We asked for an extension, just 3 months. They gave us 1 week.
And Ned thought he never had enough time at the Rose.
The team asked me what did I think, and I said we should take it because if we don't, they might not give us any time at all. If there were any remains, they would never be found. They would be destroyed, probably accidentally, simply as the development took place. I didn't think that we had any option but to go for it as hard as we could. This was such a unique site. Nothing like it had ever been found before and might never be found again. We needed to study it for generations, not just a few days. That's why we wanted it preserved. But it was more than that. It was a chance to stand there in the spot where it all happened, where Marlowe, Henslowe, Shakespeare,
Alleyn,
of course, Alleyn, all worked and spoke those words. That feeling can't be preserved any more than a theatre performance can be. It's a human experience that can't be catalogued or photographed. And that's why I think it all kicked off. Famous actors started arriving at the site, and so did the citizens of London.
Enter a demonstrator dressed in casual clothes for hot weather circa 1989. Sorry, you're just on mute there, demonstrator. If you could unmute yourself. Demonstrator, we're still on mute. If we could unmute you and go back to the beginning of your line.
As soon as it hit the news, I was down here like a flash because it was like in my backyard, you know. The Rose was discovered walking distance from where I lived. I stopped at the wire fence and leant my bike over and looked at the remains. But it was what was happening outside in the alleyway that was so extraordinary.
Someone holds up a sign saying, please don't doze the Rose. Don't
doze
the Rose. Don't doze the Rose.
It was really like a circus atmosphere. There were people singing, you know, with guitars and music and all sorts. People were leaving messages and ribbons and things and tying them onto the fence. There were a lot of people who cared about the Rose, but it was thanks to the star power of the actors from the theatre, film and TV that we got the media coverage. And the cameras came down there and it became real news.
So thrilling to have actors back at the Rose.
The response from the theatre community was overwhelming. Peggy Ashcroft, Michael Pennington, Janet Suzman, Leslie Grantham, Dustin Hoffman, Ray Fiennes, Patrick Stewart, Ian McKellen, Judi Dench, and many others showed their passion and support.
Enter a famous actor who makes a speech to the crowd.
Day after day, and by night, we actors visit the Rose. To us, it is already a shrine. This is where modern drama was born. In our own times, when so many popular shows depend on lavish spectacle and technology, the Rose reminds us of the essence of live theatre, of the human scale. Very little scenery, obviously no microphones. Nothing between the actor and his audience except the London air. The spirit of the Rose celebrates person talking to person, directly, one with another, and looking each other straight in the eye. What is the point of the Cutty Sark, moored in concrete? Who does the Tower of London guard these days? The monument to the fire of London does nothing more than get in the way of city traffic. Would you destroy any of them to build an office block? No, they're symbols, not just of the past, but of human spirit. That is why we must save the Rose.
I very much felt like an outsider looking in because most of the people there clearly had a theatrical background, and that wasn't my background. But I soon became an audience member, well, part of a standing audience.
That's what we call groundlings. Ned loved having a full crowd in the yard.
No one falls asleep standing up.
A group of actors got together to perform a version of, I think it was Marlowe's Dr. Faustus, to give a sense of what it might have been like playing to an audience in the open air, just in the street, right next to the original stage.
These metaphysics of magicians and necromantic books are heavenly. Lines, circles, scenes, letters and characters. Aye, these are those that Faustus most desires.
Oh, he's good, isn't he? Though I'll never forget the first time I heard those words.
Oh, what a world of profit and delight of power, of honor, of omnipotence is promised to the studious artisan. All things that move between the quiet poles shall be at my command. Emperors and kings are but obeyed in their several provinces, nor can they raise the wind or rend the clouds. But his dominion that exceeds in this stretcheth as far as doth the mind of man. A sound magician is a mighty god.
Here, Faustus, tire thy brains to gain a deity. One day, it was pouring with rain, and I stood on the stage, that same stage that he stood on, and took my shoes off, just standing there in the mud. There was no one else around, just for a moment, and I could feel the strength from the ground as though there was history coming up. I mean, Shakespeare's voice was heard in that place, that wet ruin, maybe giving a gentle note to one of his actors, or maybe shouted, who knows? Maybe he played possum. But what we do know is that he was here.
The words this place has heard. Perhaps there are echoes buried in the mud after all.
Lots of actors were there from the very beginning working to save the site. But then a lot of other actors' agents started telling them, get down there, it's good PR. And then there were even more people showing up because they wanted a glimpse of a celeb. Our extra eat was almost gone and all these people could be a bloody nuisance.
But it worked. We got an extension.
Another 10 weeks. Not nearly enough time, so we worked long hours and as fast as we could without damaging anything. We found both stages, the gallery outlines, pots they used to collect the pennies from the crowd, and a gold ring, which was inscribed in French and Latin. Think of me, God willing. Can you imagine who dropped that?
Hey, that's mine. Just joking. Oh, it's lovely though. Wish I could have it. I suppose it does belong in a museum.
And the demonstrations continued, showing the property developers, showing the government that we were standing by the site protecting it. There was this young lad who was really nice, you know, really, really good and generous, went out across town and got bagels for everybody. And then later that night, he brought along a sort of small caravan, one of those towaway things, and had that in the road in Park Street, just to make sure that people weren't moving in overnight to bash the place up or to try to take over. He stayed there parked on guard. Several of us took his dirty washing home to do. He was there for quite a while.
It was very hot that spring. No one carried water in those days, and there were no shops open locally. There was, however, an ice cream van parked on Southwark Bridge, wedged between all the TV broadcast units that had popped up to cover the story, and people were flocking back and forth to get ice cream.
In my day, they would have sold oysters in the playhouse. I'm not sure what this ice cream is you're talking about, but can't be as good as oysters on a hot day.
We needed the government to step up and halt construction completely, turn the Rose into a scheduled monument like Stonehenge, but they weren't interested in the past. In the 60s, it was all about making money. The past is the past and we building for the future, hard luck kind of thing. But at what cost? How much is our heritage worth?
Not everyone in the government was against us. The local MP for Southwark was Simon Hughes, and he was involved right from the start of the Rose. He threw himself behind saving it. Besides spending lots of time at the site himself, he was making intervention after intervention in the House of Commons.
Enter MP Simon Hughes, making a speech in the Houses of Parliament.
Mr. Speaker, first, on behalf of my constituents and many others in this country and beyond, I come to Parliament, to the centre of the modern national political stage, to make a plea that the recently discovered ruins of the Rose Theatre in Southwark be preserved from today henceforth for all the world to enjoy. If the site is covered up at the beginning of next week, we shall lose a site of unique importance and an opportunity for all time. It may sometimes be thought that modern constituents in an inner city working community like mine do not think that ruins are of great importance. To the contrary, our local newspaper last year did a vox pop and discovered exactly the opposite. The people of Southwark and Bermondsey said that they overwhelmingly supported the preservation of our history and our heritage. On an adjacent site, the actor, director, and great friend of Shakespeare, Sam Wanamaker, is constructing a replica of the Globe. It would be a supreme dramatic irony if an American were to be recreating a model of our heritage while we were burying the original Rose Theatre itself next door. We cannot allow that to happen. Thousands go to Stratford. On Bankside, we have the real thing.
A Rose Playhouse being supported in the Houses of Parliament. We could have never imagined that. Makes me regret tearing it down in the first place. My stepdad did keep the Rose going for a few years after we moved out, our performances to the Fortune. We rented it out to different theatre troupes. Couldn't we have done that for longer?
Can't pay the rent, remember? £20 a year. It's highway robbery. Besides, the Fortune is doing wonderfully. Have you heard? Thomas Dekker and Thomas Middleton are working on a new play about Mole Cutpurse.
Mole? Our Mole? Walking the streets in men's clothing, fighting duels, smoking tobacco in public.
That's the one! Smashing title for it too. The Roaring Girl. Mole wants the play to tell the truth about her life.
Including her love affairs with women.
Well, there might be a glancing reference or two.
As Kit would say, how about some realism, eh? And it sounds like Mole wants to do the little encore performance herself after the epilogue.
A woman on the stage. One of our stages. How about that? Won't we get in trouble?
I never mind a reasonable amount of trouble. Not when it's something worth fighting for.
The Rose, the Fortune. Our playhouses reflected the whole London community in all its variety. When the Rose is gone, will anyone remember we were here?
And just like that, the 10-week extension was over. Days before absolutely construction was going to start, Margaret Thatcher was asked about it during Prime Minister's question time. That was the moment it became national news.
Thatcher? Oh, we had a bunch of those working on the roof. Hold on, my stepdad must have kept a record.
No, she was head of the country then.
Oh, she was the new queen?
Well, not exactly. Here she comes.
Enter PM Margaret Thatcher for Prime Minister's question time.
I don't hear any trumpets. Where's the fanfare?
Will the Prime Minister join me in rejoicing at the discovery on Bankside in Southwark, in my constituency, of the ruins of the Rose Theatre? Given the risk that next Monday the site will be filled in and pile driven and the stage destroyed, will she now add her support to the discussions that are taking place between English heritage and the developers, so that we may preserve forever the greatest of the roses of England?
I agree that the discovery of the remains of the Elizabethan Rose Theatre is an historic event, and that everything possible must be done to preserve those remains so that one day they may be on public display. I understand that there have been very constructive discussions, as the honourable gentleman has said, between the developers, English Heritage and the Museum of London, and that as a result, the remains are to be preserved with minimal damage. I welcome that, and it does not rule out the possibility of a scheme for public display one day. In the meantime, constructive discussions continue.
Well, that was just lip service, wasn't it? Her government kept saying that we needed to give the site back to the developers in the end and trust them to only do minimal damage. After all, millions of pounds were at stake.
Theatre and government haven't always gotten along, have they?
House of Commons, 1989. I refuse to be obsessed by the Rose Theatre. My honourable friend, the member for Suffolk, has made strong and effective representations about it. Some of those who've been jumping up and down about it have been going over the top. And I believe that Shakespeare would have cared more about the live theatre.
Privy Council Minute 1597. There are very great disorders committed in the common playhouses, both by lewd matters that are handled on the stages and by resort and confluence of bad people. Not only no place shall be used within London or about the city or in any public place during the time of summer, but that also those playhouses that are erected and built only for such purposes shall be plucked down.
I remember that. Gave us quite a scare. And here we are, almost 400 years later, and they're making the same threats to knock down the playhouse.
It was exhausting, but the excavation was thrilling all the same.
We were slogging through in all sorts of weather, heat, rain, everything in between, just trying to get it done, working until we couldn't see anymore. A whole quarter of the site wasn't excavated at all. In the end, we just ran out of time.
The deadline expired on the 14th of May, 1989, and the site was set to be demolished the next morning, but none of us were willing to leave.
As night fell, the situation looked very bleak. But at the last minute, someone came to speak to us from English Heritage, the organisation looking after priceless cultural sites. Maybe he got the construction company to back down.
We'll see.
Re-enter MP Simon Hughes with the rep from English Heritage.
Friends, firstly, a representative from English Heritage to report their understanding of the developer's present plans.
Thank you very much. I must emphasise I am speaking for myself and English Heritage here, not for anybody else. Two things appear to have moved. In the first place, it is abundantly apparent to me that as of tomorrow morning, the issue of the future of this site is now firmly open for further negotiation.
Yes!
Hey!
Hooray!
Hooray! Hooray!
Now, the second thing, which is perhaps of more concern to us here this evening, is what happens first thing tomorrow morning. Now, clearly, we are all extremely concerned about any work whatsoever that's done on this site. The understanding that I have at the moment is that first thing tomorrow morning, the developers will resume possession of the site from the Museum of London under the existing agreement. The agreement stipulates that the remains will be covered by a membrane and sand and ballast. Now, the issue is...
What for?
Now, hold on. The issue is that does that in any way interfere with these very valuable items, remains? The agreement is that nothing will happen without in the first place, the participation both of the developers, architectural archaeological consultants and English Heritage English Heritage and the Museum of London.
You trust the developer?
Well, listen to the list. The purpose of the exercise is to protect the remains. The purpose of the exercise is not to proceed with the development. It is to protect the remains.
Oh, so they say.
How can you back the developer?
All that will happen tomorrow, as of first thing, there will be a full team of supervisors on site. It won't be a couple of guys in a truck, no. It will be a full team of supervisors and of archaeologists. What will happen will be done with spades and wheelbarrows, not with bulldozers or excavators. And that was the firm understanding that we reached this evening. There was absolutely no question of heavy equipment moving onto that site.
Why not let the dig go on?
Now
we came here to hear you say the dig would go on.
Now, there is at the moment, as I understand it, no question of the dig going on.
Why not?
Well, that's what they've said.
Why?
Why?
Yeah.
Why?
Why?
I'm not their spokesman. I'm telling you what I understand will happen tomorrow morning.
What are they going to do with the wheelbarrows and spades?
Now we can do no more than say that what should happen tomorrow morning will be done with full archaeological consultation and collaboration. They have undertaken not to overrule the archaeologists. I'm not a professional archaeologist, but we can ensure the archaeologists are present on the site tomorrow morning, and that is what they've agreed.
What you've agreed?
Can I say more? I honestly don't think it's terribly bad news. We have urgently to protect that site as of first thing tomorrow morning. That is what we're determined to do.
Why not schedule it then?
Why schedule it? Yes, why schedule it? Make it a scheduled monument. Protect the site. Save the rose.
Save the rose.
Save the rose.
Save the rose.
Save
the rose.
Thank you. Please, can I make a couple of comments? And then, as it were, a personal statement of mine. It does seem to me that the one thing that hasn't yet come forward is an undertaking of a public nature from the developers in response to the requests made to them. I don't doubt the intentions as expressed tonight by them, but what we do not yet have is any assurance that tomorrow there will be no work done on the site that will damage the site. That as yet has not been assured. And I think it's appropriate to ask for that assurance as the precondition of, as it were, our removal. It seems to me that the wishes that everybody here have is at all times peacefully, but properly and firmly to say the site that is here is as perfect as it ever has been since being rediscovered. It must never again be less perfect than this. Never again.
Yeah.
A bunch of actors, led by Ray Fiennes, who was at the RSC playing Henry VI.
Henry VI. Another Rose premiere. I remember that one. What an epic battle.
Yeah, well, we got ready for a battle of our own. Rafe organised an all-night protest. Everyone tried to spread the word. Lots of famous, influential actors like Michael Pennington, Leslie Grantham, and Janet Suzman had been making endless phone calls for months, drumming up support from their colleagues. That night was our last chance to make a stand.
There weren't even really any phones around there. Phones were as big as bricks in those days. So really, there was the only phone that was in a nearby museum space where I was sort of, the key holder. We had one lady who kept coming in because she wanted to phone her friends, and she was a middle-aged lady, and obviously they were all of a similar age, and she kept on saying, "Oh, you must come down and spend the night with Ian McKellen." And I thought, if only Ian McKellen knew all these middle-aged ladies were coming down to spend the night with him. I saw Judi, Dench and her husband, and of course you wouldn't go up to these people and talk to them because that's too important. You'd be too embarrassed. But I was standing outside, and at one point a gentleman came up behind me, and I actually had a radio with me, and he asked if he could listen to the news on it. And I turned round, and it was Ian McKellen. After listening to the bulletin, he smiled as he returned my radio, and it was at that moment that broke down the invisible barrier, as it were, for me as a demonstrator and those actors who were there. We were all in this together.
It was an absolutely electric atmosphere. I'm not sure how many people were there in the end. Some accounts say it was 400, but others say 4,000. What I can tell you is that it was packed. It felt like the whole city had turned up. I mean, some of the cast of EastEnders turned up in Elizabethan costume. It wasn't just about PR anymore. They were standing between the site and the bulldozers.
We brought Dame Peggy Ashcroft to the site that evening. She sat in a great chair that was put out for her by somebody. And she sat in that chair with that fantastic moral force that Peggy, if you remember her well, always had just by being there. A bit like that story of King Canute, who sat on the beach thinking he could make the sea retreat. It all seemed impossible. The Rose would be destroyed by the relentless mundane forces of capitalism and property development.
Not much has changed, has it?
And here's the thing I remember most. Laurence Olivier, Sir Laurence Olivier, really the godfather of all modern Shakespearean actors. He was very ill at the time. He was too ill to come down to the demonstration himself, but he wanted to be involved. So he recorded a speech, an audio recording, and they played it for all of us gathered there. In a way, it was his last public performance at the Rose site on the eve of its scheduled demolition. So it really felt like a farewell.
Can a muse of fire exist under the ceiling of commerce? Please help us stop the second Elizabethan age from destroying the glories of the first. Cry, God for Harry, England and the Rose.
Even now it makes me feel quite emotional. For him to do the rallying cry, and it was the people of Southwark that were rallying.
We will remain through the night and into the morning to act as guardians of the Rose until they come and tell us that they are willing to act as guardians of the Rose as well. Who is willing to stay all night? Who's willing to stay all night?
I'm in.
Yep.
Any
more?
I will.
Will you join us? Please, will you join us? We must show them they are accountable to a wider community, and we represent that community now. We will not be moved. We will not be moved.
So we stayed, camped in the mud and in the street, a new type of groundlings. Some of us tried to sleep, others drank hot drinks of soup we handed round. Somebody even brought me a camp bed.
We locked arms and waited.
Waited for the lorries to arrive.
This may be the last time anyone sees the Rose. Let's make the most of it. Here, take a slip of paper and tie it to the fence. You can add a message if you like. What does the Rose mean to you?
They hand out slips of paper and pens to anyone who wants them. Audience members tie pieces of paper on the fence, even if they don't write messages.
Here we are.
This belongs to all of us now. There are millions more here in spirit than in fact.
Finally, the morning broke and the lorries arrived, but they would have to go through us first.
No one moved.
For over an hour, we stared them down.
Dame Peggy got out of her chair and sat down in the mud, blocking the way.
Simon and other MPs called an urgent meeting between the developers and English Heritage. We waited on edge.
At last, we saw the lorries pull back.
Thank God! Thank God!
All right.
So you did change the course of the waves. You saved the Rose.
We stopped it from being destroyed further. Even one of the lorry drivers ended up signing the petition to save the site, along with a policeman on duty at the demonstration. The government agreed to compensate the builders for the time it took to redesign the development, so they built the office block all right, but they did change the foundations to go around the site without harming it. So now the Rose is in the basement of an office building, which the developers decided to rename Rose Court, as though they'd supported the Rose all along. But we haven't saved it, no, it's in purgatory, in limbo. There's so much we don't know yet because we don't have enough money to excavate it yet.
Nothing happens unless you fight for it. People fought for the Rose then, but now it's all but forgotten.
It's lying there, inert. It's covered in a layer of water and sand, which was meant only to be temporary and can go wrong at any time. We've had a few close calls over the past 30 years. It's now the site that's been monitored for longest around the world. It's one of the earliest sites that was ever monitored. English heritage has been key to that preservation, I must say.
You're welcome. Told you it wouldn't all be bad news.
And we're very grateful. But the government refused to schedule it as an ancient monument in '89 because that would give rise to claims of compensation. The irony is that because of the Rose, a law was actually passed saying that any historical remains found during construction have a right to be preserved and paid for by the developers. So that's all thanks to the Rose, but the Rose itself hasn't benefited. Even though it was finally scheduled as an ancient monument 3 years later in '92, we weren't compensated at all.
You know, when you're at a bus stop, Oyster card in hand, and you can't leave, even though you've been there for a very long time and no bus is coming, you can't leave because one day it will arrive and the project will arrive and we'll move forward and finally get stability for the site and a better presentation for the site. You know what I mean?
So you do have oysters, though I'm not sure what you mean by a bus stop, but I think I get the idea. To be fair, you've learned so much already. What else do you need to know about the Rose?
Oh, there's still so much that's just guesses, conjecture. The great hope is the staircase. No one knows how you got up to the galleries in the Rose. The current reconstruction of the Globe Theatre has a stair tower just stuck on the side, but that's based on very limited evidence from the Globe next door to the Rose, which only partially survives. The Rose could answer all our questions about that. People may have climbed up ladders inside or small timber staircases, but we don't know. So that's the key question that everyone's looking for.
Wish I could tell you, but that's for you to discover, isn't it?
That's what makes it exciting, I suppose. I can't wait to find out.
Hit Marlowe re-enters, joining Philip, Ned and the others.
What do you think of all this?
Well, I think I knew at the time that this was special, what we were all doing, but I never thought people would care about it 400 years later.
I did. That's why I saved everything I could. All the papers.
I just wish I could have written a few more plays for you. Might have made a difference.
Enter Will Shakespeare. What about my plays?
Oh, get out of here, shake thief. You've got your own playhouse.
Oh, but I love the Rose.
You still owe me the rights to Henry VI Part 2.
You owe me an apology for rewriting my shows.
And you owe me £10 for beer.
Well, good luck with it all. Oh, save the Rose.
Bloody opportunist. Great nose for marketing, that one.
He was a key part of our story too. Wouldn't have been the same without him.
He always did know how to turn a phrase.
Et tu, Nede?
Anyway, I think your demonstrations were a huge success.
Oh, I don't know. We fought as hard as we could. And you could say we won, but the battle feels half finished because it's half forgotten.
Don't lose heart.
We can uncover the Rose and bring it to life again. Plays have been performed in and around the ruins on and off now for decades. It's open to the public most weeks on a Saturday, but that's not enough. The area around the site is in such poor condition, no heating, no toilets, that it's not possible to have school groups. And we can't have visitors at all during the colder months.
What a shame. The Rose was meant to be a space for everyone, all classes, all genders, from all over the country and beyond. That's how it always was.
That's why the local community, the acting profession, and anyone who loved the theatre came together to save it.
So why don't more people know it exists?
We've drawn up plans to finish the dig and make it now into a permanent museum and performance space called the Rose Revealed Project.
So how much do you need for that?
Always the businessman. I suppose it's a bit more than 20 quid nowadays.
Well,
£50?
I mean,
100?
Not 1,000.
10 million.
Sweet Shrovetide, £10 million.
But every little helps. And there are many ways to support, like volunteering or just paying the Rose a visit. We won't stop fighting to save the Rose.
We're going to
We'll
have to
do
fight
it.
for that.
Help.
End of play.